Good day, Deep in Word family. Welcome to day 212 of our Bible study review. Today we're going through the Psalms 59 through 63. Psalm 59 is a psalm of David when King Saul actually sent his men to kill him in his own house. You can read about this account in 1 Samuel chapter 19, verses 11 through 18. Let's start reading from verse 1. It says, "Deliver me from my enemies, O my Elohim. Give me refuge from those who rise up against me. Deliver me from the workers of iniquity, and save me from bloodthirsty people. For they lie in wait for my life. The mighty are gathered against me, not for my transgression, nor for my sin, O Yahweh. For no guilt of mine, they run and prepare themselves. Arise to help me and take notice. You, O Yahweh, Elohim of hosts, the Elohim of Israel. Awake to punish all of the nations. Do not be gracious to any of the wicked transgressors." So if you were to go back and to refresh your memory on this account, King Saul's own son, Jonathan, was a friend to David. Jonathan overheard his father's plan to kill David. So Jonathan ran to tell David, and also David's daughter, Michal, who was the daughter of King Saul. Both of King Saul's children were on David's side, so they helped him to escape. While David is on the run, he is petitioning Yahweh, the Father. And he says, in this case, he says, look, arrest these men who are after my life. And he says, I am not guilty of anything. And he wasn't at the time. He was innocent. King Saul was seeking after the life of David because he was already anointed to be the next king. King Saul was just boiling over with jealousy. In this plea, we see that David is asking Yahweh to deliver him from the enemies who are seeking after his life. But then he says to punish the nations who are wicked. So he petitioned him about a current time, but he's speaking about the future as well. Let's pick up in verse 8. He says, "But you, O Yahweh, will laugh at them. You will have all of the nations in derision. O my strength, I will wait on you, for Elohim is my refuge. The Elohim of loving kindness will go before me. Elohim will cause me to look in triumph on my enemies." David is making a bold declaration of faith as he hides himself in Yahweh. He says, I will wait. I will wait for you to deliver me, right? And so this is also courtroom speech. I will wait for the judge to judge righteously on my behalf. Verse 13, "Consume them in wrath. Consume them so they no longer exist. And let them know that Elohim rules in Jacob to the ends of the earth." Verse 16, he says, "But I will sing of your power. I will sing aloud of your loving kindness in the morning, for you have been my refuge and escape in the day of my trouble." So he says, while I wait for you to rightly divide and rightly judge, he says, I'm going to praise you while I'm waiting for the verdict. This is a great example of the attitude that we should have as well. He is the ultimate judge. And while we wait on him to judge rightly, to divide the sheep from the goats, we shall praise him while we wait. Psalm 60 is another psalm of David, and this is fast forwarding to the time when he is on the throne. He's king at this point, but at this point, he is trying to take back those territories that were run over by the other nations, the territory that the Father said shall belong to the children of Israel. But the children of Israel, as a whole, when they crossed over the Jordan and entered into the promised land, did not completely fulfill the command of the Father. In regards to driving out the nations from the land of promise, he said, if you allow them to remain, they will become a scorn to you. And so David is going back to drive them out. You can go back and refresh your memory in 2 Samuel chapters 8 all the way through chapter 10. Let's pick up in verse 1 of this psalm. It says, "O Elohim, you have rejected us. You have scattered us. You have been displeased. Take us back. You have made the earth tremble. You have split it open. Heal its breaches, for it shook. You have shown your people hard times. You have made us drink wine, causing us to stagger. You have given a banner to those who fear you, that they may flee to it from the bow." King David is speaking of the difficulty in war. As you may know, you win some and you lose some, and those losses, they don't feel good. And so he is crying out to Yahweh for victory. Let's pick up in verse 6. It says, "Elohim has spoken in his holiness. I will rejoice. I will divide Shechem and measure out the valley of Succoth. So he's talking about taking back territory for Israel, for the people of Yah. And he says, Gilead or Gilead is mine, and Manasseh is mine. Ephraim is also my helmet, and Judah is my scepter. In this moment, David is speaking prophetically. And as you can see, Ephraim and Judah are tied together, and they haven't even been divided as of yet. So he's speaking of the two people groups that represent all of Israel: Judah, which will later on be the southern kingdom, and Ephraim, which is represented by the 10 northern tribes, which is known as Israel. Because mind you, the kingdom does not split until after Solomon. Verse 8, Moab is my wash basin. And so this is not a good thing. He's not speaking well about Moab. And he says, over Edom, I will cast my shoe. Casting your shoe or throwing your shoe is a great sign of disrespect or a great sign of being at war with another people. For instance, I don't know if you remember, but there was a soldier that was enraged because he felt extremely deceived. He said, we were summoned to go over to another territory because we were told that there was a threat over there. And he said, millions of people died. Innocent people died because of the order that you gave. And he threw his shoe at the former president. Verse 9, who will bring me to the fortified city? David is asking Elohim a question. He says, who will lead me into Edom? You, O Elohim, have you not cast us off? And you, O Elohim, did not go out with our armies. Give us help from trouble, for the help of man is worthless. David knows and understands that success in war only comes from the help of Yahuwah, right? The help of Elohim. He knows that he has no victory outside of him. Even if you just go back a little bit and remember with Joshua and Moses and how they completely relied on Yahuwah for their victory. And we saw that the staff, right, that represented the presence of Yahuwah at that time, when the staff was raised, they would have victory. But if the staff was brought low, then their enemies would prevail over them. So David knows the story of his people, and he understands that there is no success and there's no victory outside of him. And so he says, through Elohim, we will do valiantly, for he will tread down our enemies. David knows it's not by his power or his might. Psalm 61 is another psalm of David, and I'm just going to read through the whole thing because it's relatively short. He says, hear my cry, O Elohim, and attend to my prayer. From the end of the earth I will cry to you. When my heart faints, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. And he says, for you have been a refuge for me and a strong tower from the enemy. I will abide in your tent forever, and I will seek refuge in the covering of your wings. For you, O Elohim, have heard my vows. You have given me the heritage of those who fear your name. Verse 6, it says, may you prolong the king's life, and may his years be as many generations. May he sit enthroned before Elohim forever. Oh, prepare mercy and truth, which may preserve him. So David is speaking about himself, but this also looks like this can be pointing to the Messiah, right? But at this moment in time, he is petitioning Elohim for his own life, that he may be preserved by his mercy and by his truth. There is no life outside of our Elohim, and because of his mercy, we still live, because all men have sinned before him. And he says, may the king, right? May he be preserved in your truth, right? Because his truth is life. Verse 8, he says, thus I will sing praise to your name forever, that I may fulfill my vows day by day. David illustrates in the psalm that our Elohim has placed eternity in our hearts, right? Anytime people talk about the subject of death, there's this great fear that washes over people. That's because he never created us in the first place to die. Our design is to live forever. And the truth is, everyone will live forever, right? But we want to make sure that we live forever in his presence. We don't want to be banished from his presence, because outside of life is death, and death eternal. And that is great suffering. And so David is pleading, right? May I live before you forever so that I can praise you forever. David understands the whole duty of man. Psalm 62 is another Psalm of David. Let's pick up and just start reading from verse 1. He says, "My soul waits in silence on Elohim alone. From him comes my salvation." So there's no expectation outside of Elohim. It's in him alone that he knows he's going to be delivered. And he says right here in verse 5, "My soul, wait silently for Elohim, for my hope is from him." Why does he tell his soul to be silent, right? Sometimes our mouths, when we speak doubt, we can push back what the Father means for us, because the power of life and death is in the tongue. And so sometimes we have to remind ourselves that if we're not going to speak faith, we need to be silent. Verse 6, it says, "He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my refuge. I will not be moved. In Elohim is my salvation and my glory. The rock of my strength and my shelter is in Elohim. Trust in him at all times." There's no greater assurance. If we place our trust in anything else, we will be let down, because the things of this world are temporal. Our Elohim is everlasting. Verse 9, "Surely people of low degree are a breath, and men of high degree are a lie. If they are placed in the balance, they are altogether lighter than a vapor." And so he's drawing this picture of the scales, right? And the scales are the balance, right? And we know that in the 7th biblical month, ecclesiastical calendar, that the sign in the heavenlies is the scales, right? So the world perverts this in astrology. Astrology and astronomy are two different things. The stars in the sky tell of him and his story of all of creation and what he is going to do. In the 7th biblical month, what takes place? The Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, right? Which is the day of judgment. That's why we see those scales. So David is saying, you can weigh men in the scales, weigh them in the balance, and they still don't topple it over. They are but a breath before Elohim. Keep that picture in mind as we continue to read forward. In verse 10, he says, "Do not trust in oppression and do not become vain in robbery." We know that the commandment of the children of Israel was to keep an equal balance of the scales, right? And many of them were wicked. Once they had greed in their heart, they would have an unequal or an unjust balance on the scale. And he says, look, if your riches increase, don't become greedy, right? Don't become corrupt. If you increase in your riches, do right. Verse 11, "Elohim has spoken once. Twice have I heard this, that power belongs to Elohim." Mankind is drunk with power. Mankind cannot handle power because they always pervert it. So the true power belongs to our Elohim. And he says, "Also to you, O Adon, belongs mercy, for you render to each one according to his work." Not only is our God all powerful, but he is full of mercy and love, right? And we don't see that as a whole in the characteristics of man. Man is fallen from that glory and from that state. And we see at the very end that he is going to weigh our works in the balance. And so those who have repented, those who have come clean before him, he will exercise mercy. And then he will weigh out our good works as we walk into the kingdom. Again, not a works-based salvation, but once you come to the saving grace of Elohim, who is Yeshua, then we are called to do a different work. We did works of the flesh, which are dead, right? So if you weighed that in the balance, then what would be your punishment? Death, and death eternal. But he sent his son to pay your debt. And so now that our slate is washed clean, now we're called to do a different work. The work of righteousness, all right? This should not be foreign to you, because in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 12 through 14, our Messiah is going to weigh our works. Our works are going to go through fire and testing. And if everything was not done for the kingdom, if it wasn't done for eternal purposes, if it was for selfish gain, it won't transfer into the kingdom. And so we need to become more familiar with this concept of our works being weighed in the balance, because they will be. There's a great reward for those who change their walk, who truly repent and walk in his righteousness, right? And pursue the kingdom. Seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all else will be added unto you. But if we chase the other things first, right, we make empty and void all of our attempts. We live life in vain at that point. Psalm 63 is a psalm of David while he's in the wilderness of Judah. Let's just read the whole thing, and I'll start from verse 1. He says, "O Elohim, you are my Elohim. Early I will seek you," right? Seek first the kingdom. As soon as you rise, you should seek his face. And he says, "My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you in a dry and thirsty land with no water." So he's in the wilderness and he's seeking the presence of Yahuwah. And he says in verse 2, "I have seen you in the sanctuary," or he says, "I have seen a vision of you in the sanctuary to see your power and your glory." He longs to be in the presence of Yahuwah, and he's having this vision of him in the temple. And he says, "Because your loving kindness is better than life." David says the meaning of life is to know him. He says knowing his character, knowing his love is better than life itself. David is declaring that there's no experience in the earth that could fulfill his heart like knowing the Creator. And he says, "My lips will praise you. Thus will I bless you while I live. I will lift up my hands in your name." Verse 5, "My soul will be satisfied as with marrow and fatness," right? So we know in the bone marrow, there are several nutrients. If you cook down bones in like a chicken stock or a beef stock, what's the purpose of that? It's to cook out, draw out the nutrients that are in the bone. And we know that it brings healing to our body. So David is likening the presence of Yah, being with him in fellowship with him. His soul is satisfied like the natural body is satisfied from the nutrients from bone marrow and fat. And he says, "My mouth will praise you with joyful lips when I remember you on my bed and meditate on you in the night watches, because you have been my help. Therefore, in the shadow of your wings, I will rejoice. My soul clings hard to you. Your right hand upholds me. But those who seek my soul to destroy it will go into the lower parts of the earth. They will fall by the sword. They will be a portion for jackals. But the king will rejoice in Elohim. Everyone who swears by him will glory, because the mouth of liars will be stopped." I find peace and comfort in Psalm 63 because all of us are in a wilderness right now, and we know that there are wicked people who are ruling this earth, and they seek to destroy people so they can bring about their kingdom, their one world government. And it's not because of anything that has been done unto them. It's because they are drunk with power, right? They have a God complex. But David says, look, the mouth of liars, they will be stopped. Those who seek our lives to destroy it, they will be stopped. They'll no longer be able to speak their lies in deceit. At some point, our Father is going to hand down the gauntlet. They will be judged and they will be removed, and we will never have to think about them again. I hope that you found peace and comfort in today's reading as well. Deep in Word family, that's all that I have for you today. Until tomorrow, Yah bless.